Oh, the doors are closed. So I think it's good to grab a seat. If you're outside, come on in. My intro goes for a couple of minutes before I introduce yourself. So if you wanted to just sit there, I do this bit. Oh, you can stand next to me if you like. Okay, great. Have I already got the right slide on? Brilliant. That looks like the place. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the public roundtable. Well, attempted a roundtable to discuss how gambling impacts the Northern Beaches and what we as a community might do about it. I'm Kim Smee. I'm the editor and founder of Manly Observer, which is a local news service. I'm your MC today, and I'm really interested to hear what people have to say. And I feel like it is an under-discussed topic. Of course, if you actually work in the area, it probably doesn't feel like an under-discussed topic, but as a layperson, it's not something that really comes up in conversation very often. So why am I here? Well, Manly Observer doesn't carry any gambling advertisements. It's not that I hate gambling, and I'm not averse to a rare flutter, but I have seen, sadly firsthand, the impact of gambling when it's being used by someone you love as an escape or a salve for their pain, and it hurts more than one person. I've never really talked about that experience, and I'm not going to. Because thankfully there are many people here, and at least one other person here today who is braver than I am, who is going to share their insights and their lived experience. Hopefully we come together, we have a chat. You might be here because you already know, or you feel that there is a real problem and harm with gambling, or maybe you don't think there is, or you don't know if there is, and you're here to learn. So I think it's going to be a good opportunity for people to share their insights, and we're going to hear from some experts, and we're going to look at some solutions on a hyperlocal level. As we jump into formal proceedings, I'd like to acknowledge the Aboriginal people who gathered in groups to yarn and problem solve long before us. I pay respect to the elders past and those present, and I acknowledge their rich ancient history and also the horrors of their modern history that they've experienced as the First Nations people of this country. I'd now like to invite their newly re-elected, unopposed, Mayor of the Northern Beaches, Sue Hines, for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Kim. And on behalf of the Northern Beaches Council, I welcome you to this public roundtable on gambling impact on the Northern Beaches. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands of elders past and present on which we celebrate today, and other Aboriginal people who may be present. I'd like to acknowledge that we have some very new councillors here today, and experienced. I don't want to say old because that's always a reflection on ages, but going by alphabetical order, because I don't want to show any favouritism. Councillor Nicholas Bajard, who's at the back. Councillor Vincent DeLuca, OAM, who's sitting here at the front. Councillor Kristen Glanville, who's sitting at the other front. Councillor Sarah Grattan, who also has another role with Lifeline. Councillor Jolene Hackman. Councillor Ethan Hernjack. And have I missed anyone? Because I've got some other names on here, but I can't see them. There's also an apology from Michael Regan, member of Wakehurst, and we have Sean Moran here representing Michael as well. This event wouldn't have happened without some organisation and collaboration between some amazing organisations, and they have got together and organised this event today. So I'd like to also acknowledge Wesley Mission, Pittwater Uniting Church, Forest Kirk Uniting Church, Northern Beaches Uniting Church, Lifeline Northern Beaches, Local Kind, Roses in the Ocean, and Special Advisor Pat Daly, OAM former Northern Beaches councillor. of which this all kicked off 6 years ago. Remember that debate well. Today we are here to share knowledge, ideas, solutions to address the impact of gambling harm in our community. We're excited to host this roundtable in response to a council resolution made when gambling harm minimisation policy was adopted in March this year. Council's policy aims to limit the negative and harmful impact of online gambling and electronic gambling machines or poker machines in the community. We know problem gambling is not just an individual problem, nor does it affect just the Northern Beaches. It is a major social issue, and one that has profound effects on individuals, their families, and the broader community. It's important that we continue to play a role in education, advocacy, and lobbying, and Council is proud to take that leadership role. Thank you very much, and I'll hand back now to Kim. And what an incredible day we're going to have. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Now this is the moment of truth. Is that the one I wanted? I think that's the one I wanted. Okay, so the roundtable comes about, well, I think Sue's covered a lot of that actually, but from the resolution that was passed in March by Councillor Glanville. But Northern Beaches Council is actually only one of 2 councils in all of New South Wales to have a formal policy on gambling impact. The other council is Fairfield. I know gambling is essentially a state matter, and sometimes councils can be criticised for spending too much time on broader issues, as many commenters often have say on Manly Observer, you know, what is it, roads, rates, rubbish, and to focus on those things. I cover a lot of stories and I report on a lot of serious injuries, and one thing I've observed is that it's always, it's actually the first person on scene that makes the difference. How quickly that first person on scene reacts before the main players get there makes the biggest difference. So perhaps we can conceptualise today as we're the first guys on the scene and we're given our best CPR, waiting for the folks in uniform to arrive in the scene, because that really does make a difference generally, whether somebody survives or not, and perhaps what we come up together together as a community today will make it could actually save a life. The aim is to minimise harm, rather than stand back in horror or walk away and pretend it's not happening. So anyway, Council resolved in March this year that a roundtable discussion be convened to discuss gambling impacts. Sue's already gone through the organisations involved, so I'm just going to success. So you'll see up here the Gamble Aware helpline. We recognise that gambling can harm people and communities. We're going to hear from our expert panellists shortly about some of the ways that that can occur and what opportunities there are to seek help. We're going to talk about some pretty tough things today, and there is some unwarranted but pervasive shame and stigma associated with gambling. And it might be difficult. It might be really difficult to hear about some of these things, or maybe you've got your own experience. Maybe I might walk out at some point for a little bit and have some fresh air, but I'm told that there is a counsellor, a lifeline counsellor, there we go, over there. So if you do pop out, it might actually only be for a phone call or whatever. So if you're fine, just give her a thumbs up. And if you're not, just head out and you may be forced to talk about your feelings. But she'll just check on you and make sure you're okay. Those numbers are up there. And I think that, this is the bit where I get to pontificate. I had some pretty detailed notes and some pretty shocking statistics to throw you into the subject matter. Statistics showing that we on the Northern Beaches are losing, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, Kate, but 2.8 million a week to pokies. You can almost buy a house. I was going to tell you information about how easily school kids can identify between the different betting apps just by the colours and the shapes, because the advertising is so prolific. I was going to talk to you about the 5 years that I worked in the justice system in Western Australia, where pubs and clubs are thriving despite poker machines being banned in all pubs and clubs. If you want to bet, you have to go to the casino. And again, I'm not a Puritan. I've been to that casino. I've gambled in that casino. I've definitely drunk too much at that casino. But it was the only place you could play pokies in 4,000 kilometres. So you really, really had to make a very concerted effort if you wanted to be part of that. It meant that there was a lot of live music. And many people kept their wages. But today we're not so much focusing on those legislative changes and those state matters, while we can talk about them. We're talking about some of the smaller things that we can do to, perhaps there's something missing. There's something missing from a person's life. Perhaps they're lonely. Perhaps they're going through something very serious, and they're using this. They're using gambling as, as I referenced before, as a salve, or as an alternative, or as a way to numb. Maybe we as a community can come up with some solutions that are proactive, that can help that person so they have options. Okay. That's not my bit. I think we were supposed to have the agenda, but I'll just tell you how it's going to go. The speakers, we've got, I think it's 5. They're going to cram all their knowledge in 10 minutes. I'm going to time them, but we've got somebody, I think, with there we go, with a little thing, so it shouldn't go over the 10 minutes. We won't have time for questions, but in the second part, we're all going into breakout groups. At the back, we'll be discussing youth. In the middle, seniors. And in this room, it's going to be professional development. So there's going to be a lot of time for conversations and asking questions of whoever's around. And then we're going to come back, and for session 3, we're going to have, I'm not sure, 1 or 2, we'll see how we're going for time. 1 or 2 people will talk about some of the actions, the solutions that the group has come up with, or tangible things that they think that can be, enacted for next steps. And then we get to eat some food. So then we'll have a light lunch, and then we can talk even more, or perhaps we want to change the topic, which is perfectly fine as well. Okay, so I will introduce Professor Wayne Warburton, MQ. He's an academic specialist on gambling harm, to come and take the mic. Good luck.
Okay, this is a little high tech for me, but I'm going to give it my best shot. I want to talk about what gambling is. It's because the way we look at it has changed a lot over the last 30 or 40 years. I want to talk about the prevalence. I want to talk about some of the impacts on the gambler and other people. And then I want to talk specifically about some of the problems that youth have with gambling, because I think it's a different and specific set of problems. So I'm going to do that all in 10 minutes, and we'll just see how we go. Okay, back in 1980, this is how we looked at problem gambling. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but these were the diagnostic criteria. And when you can say it's forgery, fraud, embezzlement, disrupting the family, borrowing money, can't account for the money, it's just all about the money, right? And really, it's not, doesn't look like a disorder, right? It just looks like somebody doing really bad things. Then we get to 1994, and again, it's still under part of the DSM, which is a manual we use to diagnose psychological and psychiatric illnesses, as something that's a disorder of impulse control. The criteria are a little bit different. They're starting to look a little bit more like an addiction, but really it's something that's looked at as something that's a failure of control. And in fact, in the 1990s, gambling wasn't considered an addiction. It was considered bad behaviour, and that's the way it was treated in the criminal justice system. And that's the way it was treated. So I started working with problem gamblers in the mid-1990s, and one of the things that really struck me was that when I looked at my clients who had a drug addiction and when I looked at my clients who had a gambling addiction, they looked just the same. And, we used to talk, those of us who worked in this kind of industry, that, we're seeing the same thing here, but legally they're miles apart, because if it was a drug, then it gets kind of put into the addiction box, but if it's problem gambling, it's into the you're behaving badly box. Then something happened in 2011 and I think really shook things up. What happened in 2011 was that the American Society for Addiction Medicine changed the definition of what an addiction is. And they did this because we had, by that stage, a whole lot of research using brain imaging. And because of all of that brain imaging research, we were able to see that what's happening in the brain of a person who has a behavioural addiction, like a gambling addiction, is pretty much exactly the same as what's happening in the brain of a person who has another addiction. And I currently work a lot with kids who have a digital addiction, and all of the brain imaging studies on that show exactly the same changes. And so the definition in 2011 that they released is that addiction is a chronic brain disorder that's not limited to substance abuse. And they go on to say that all addictions, whether it's a behavioural addiction like gambling or a digital addiction, have these same kind of characteristics of, you think about it a lot, it's very important to you, you compulsively use it, you want more and more to feel good, you get upset, agitated and irritable, and you find it very difficult when you can't have it, and you keep doing it despite substantial negative consequences. And that, okay. And they said addiction is not about drugs, it's about brains. And so we started to see different ways of looking at it. Now look, not long after that, in the next edition of the DSM, so this is the third one we've looked at, now what they've done is they've put it into this different section for addictive disorders. So now they've taken problem gambling from being a problem of impulse control to being a problem of addiction. And when you look at the sorts of criteria that they have, they look more like an addiction, thinking about a tolerance, you can't stop, you get withdrawal symptoms, and so on. And the other thing that's really important here is that this is the point at which we start to see that it's a problem that is on a continuum. And at one end of the continuum, you have the people who don't have a problem, which is most of us, and then you have people with a bit of a problem, and then you have people with a bigger problem, and then you have this kind of smaller group who have a substantial addictive disorder type level problem. And so that's the first time we see it. And in the most recent diagnostic manual to come out, which is the 2022 edition of the World Health Organization Diagnostic Manual, they have a completely different way of looking at it. And essentially, they look at all of the addictions the same way, which is three things. You can't stop doing it. Impaired control. It takes increasing priority in your life over all of the other things. So it starts to take over the other parts of your life until it's the most important thing in your life. And the most important thing is that you keep on doing it. You know it's doing terrible things to you, to your health, to your life, to the lives of the people around you. It's affecting your relationships, it's affecting your work, it's affecting what you do, but you keep on doing it knowing that you do that. And in fact, in that particular manual, every behavioural addiction has exactly the same criteria, those three things, right? So that's the way we look at it differently. Now, in problem gambling in Australia, we're a little bit weird. We recognise that continuum, but we use a somewhat different measure, which is always surprising to me. But we still look at people having a risk or being problematic or having a clinical level disorder. And we commonly use this measure called the Problem Gambling Severity Index. This actually doesn't link to either of those two manuals, so it diagnoses what problem gambling is in a slightly different way. But when you look at the questions, it really tells you those same sorts of things are happening, that you can't stop, it's overtaking your life, and you're keeping on going despite the fact that it's having this really substantial impact on lots of different ways, parts of your life. So how much of a problem is it? Well, in Australia, again, we don't use those diagnostic criteria, which I think is ridiculous, but, I'll put my own views aside. We use that problem gambling index. And you get a score from under 27, and if you get a score of 0, it means you don't have a problem, and that's what most people get. There are different ways of then deciding if you have a moderate problem, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But you can also have a substantial problem, which is probably the level at which we're mostly concerned. And what we typically find in New South Wales, in the most recent study that I found, they found that about 6.6% in people in New South Wales are at risk, so they have a score of 1 or more. Then another 2.6% of people have a moderate problem, so we're pretty worried about it because it's starting to have a substantial impact on areas of their life that is really concerning. And then we have this group of about 1%, and they're the group that we would think of as having this clinical level addiction. So if you're going to think of it like an addiction, like a drug addiction, that's kind of where that 1% is. In terms of Australia, using slightly different cut-offs, we had a big study in 2022. They found that, I'm going to have to go back, 73% of people gamble, but they found that of those people who gamble, 46% of people over 18 who gamble are at some risk, and more men than women. Okay, so that's the prevalence. And the world prevalence for moderate risk is about the same as what we have in New South Wales, which is about 2.5%, and a clinical level addictive problem is about 1%. So what does it do? Well, the best study I've ever seen is the one by Brown et al. And if you want to look at the impacts of gambling on the whole of society, you would go to this article. It says that there's widespread harm across the entire social spectrum, and they said that the years of healthy life lost annually due to gambling in Victoria alone was 101,000 years. They're huge numbers. There is damage to relationships, psychological distress, health problems, financial problems, and importantly, what they found was that 85% of those negative impacts came from at-risk and moderate gamblers, not the 1% that we'd think would have this kind of drug level kind of addiction. So I'm just going to go back here, if I can. Here's where the impacts are on the person. About 20% are on health, about 90% are on their psychology. There's a 45% of them are on their finances, about 8% on their work, other harms, and about 24% on their relationships. So you can see there's a range of harms, and there's a substantial amount in each of those ones. Now, I just wanted, I'm not going to talk about that because I want to talk about youth. I want to talk about youth because when you're a young person, you're at far greater risk. I like these studies because they actually use the DSM criteria, so the kind of diagnostic criteria that we tend to use clinically. And what they found was, for example, at the age of 16 years, 3% of kids rather than 1% would meet criteria. And that's what we typically find in Australia, is that the problem for youth is probably 3 to 4 times as great as the problem for adults. And we know that that's true because they have a developing brain that essentially pushes you towards risk, but the brake that you have on behaviour is not yet fully developed. So it's harder to control those impulses. The other problems that youth have are this convergence between gambling and gaming, this huge growth in sports betting, and then this reluctance to talk about what's going on. Okay, so gambling's illegal when you're under 18, or they might have committed crimes, so they don't want to talk about it, they feel ashamed, they're ashamed of the reprisals, what might happen. So youth face very distinct and different problems than adults do. And I think in the forum today, you're going to have to talk about the problems for youth distinctly compared to the problems for adults, because I think their problems are substantial and very different. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I want another 20 minutes of that. That was, yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, I was very sad to have to stand up and get you to stop there because that was fascinating and it was beautifully communicated. Thank you so much for that presentation. Wow, okay. I can't believe how recent some of those changes are as well. I mean, 2022 is when they're thinking, oh yeah, maybe it's a different category and it's not just for bad people who can't control themselves. Okay, next up I would like to invite Northern Sydney Local Health District, Crystal Hillary. Thank you.
Hello. I'm just going to get straight stuck into it. And I want to start with some words from a Northern Sydney young person. I would like you to consider not to advertise gambling ads to people, children under 18 years of age. Advertisements on apps such as Spotify and also in public places. Gambling advertisements are everywhere, and there is none to little filter on the places that they're shown. On YouTube even, for kids 6 years of age, where they can be exposed to this negative industry that can adversely affect their life in the future. I think there should be strict rules and regulations on the places that betting companies are allowed to display their advertisements. This is a request for action from Connor, a 15 to 16-year-old who took part in our Not Kids business study, the results of which I'm going to share with you today. If I can make this work. Before I dive into this project, I do just want to explain a little bit from where I come from. And I come from the Population Health Promotion Service. And our goal is to keep people in Northern Sydney healthy and out of hospital by focusing on prevention. So as our name suggests, we don't work one-on-one with people on an individual basis, but rather we work at a population level to improve health across the population. The data and evidence that you're seeing on screen now is just some of the reasons why we decided that it was so important for us to be working in this space. So let me get into the project. Oh my gosh. Okay, so our Not Kids business study aimed to capture the gambling ads and promotion that Northern Sydney teens under the age of 18 come across in their daily lives. And we used what we call a citizen science approach and a particular method called photo voice, where young people actually captured by taking photos or screenshots of things that they came across during their day. And then we held sessions with them to kind of unpack it and make sense of it all. And so to do this, we worked with 2 high schools. These were 2 single-sex schools based in the North Sydney Council, and we worked specifically with Year 10 students. So these are 15, 16-year-olds, and 175 of those students opted into this project. We co-developed and led a workshop alongside a gamble-aware counsellor, and this session was really the kind of 3 main objectives. One was to educate, so we used this definition of gambling. We also educated around gambling harms, and then also where to go for support. Another component of that workshop was around engaging, so we wanted them to feel obviously excited and interested about participating in the project, and then also that it was a meaningful cause. And lastly, and importantly, was around ethics. So it was really important that young people participating in this project understood that we didn't want them going out and actually sourcing or engaging with gambling promotion or advertisements, but rather just capturing what they saw organically in their daily lives. Over a week period, we asked young people to capture, so take photos or screenshots of what they saw and then send that through via text message to a secure messaging service. We received 36 of those photos, which our team then analysed to identify for common themes and patterns. And then we held one more workshop with each of those schools, and that was really to present those findings back to students and then open up a discussion about what they found most concerning and also share their ideas and solutions for change. So this is what we found. So what's showing on screen now is what appeared in free online and downloaded mobile games. So you can see we've got like a whole range of different ads popping up. And these, I have to stress, were in games unrelated to gambling. So these were like common word games or puzzle games. And they often popped up in between levels or in between games, or also were features of, or incorporated as features into games to kind of get some rewards. These were particularly of concern to young people because students said that they associated gambling with fun. My gosh. Next. Okay. Oh no. There we go. It's gone back. Okay. So if anybody here listen to music, audiobooks or podcasts, Well, if you're listening on a free account, it's likely that you'll be forced to listen to unskippable gambling ads, and that's what our students in this project told us. I know it's very kind of tab heavy there, but in discussion there are a lot of other examples of gambling companies or gambling ads that came up. And another issue that was raised by our participants in this group as well were integrated gambling ads in podcasts as well, so something else to be mindful of. Social media, probably no surprise that that's here. The photos on the right relate to kind of sports betting. I just want to stress that these are on the For You pages of 15 to 16-year-olds, so these ads are being specifically targeted at these young people. And then we've got the first and second photos, which are more kind of your pro-gambling messages. So that first one is a little bit sarcastic, and that's exactly what how the young person who sent that in described it. But I guess it depends on who's interpreting that as well. And that second one is a content creator sharing tips on how to play blackjack. And again, that's that common theme of if you want to learn how to kind of beat the system, you can just kind of find that online through this. The other thing I just want to highlight here is the high level of engagement in that for the photo 1 and photo 3 with over 35,000 likes. So when young people see this, it just reinforces that this behaviour is popular and normal. I'm having a hard time with this thing. Oh, go back. Got it. Okay, these are photos that were taken out and about in their local environment. The first, the signage is pretty self-explanatory, but that middle large photo is a casino-style game in one of their favourite arcades. And young people said there were so many of these types of games in arcades where they're just putting in coins for a reward of tokens. And then those photos on the right, young people sent in of just things that we see all the time, those prize box machines in shopping centres and other areas where young people frequent. Lastly, I need to say that these examples on screen are not photos that were actually submitted by young people, but these are things that came up in those discussions at the end. And the first is around blind box figurines, which is something I had never heard of before. But our girls cohort in particular said that this was a massive trend amongst their friends and something as they described as a real-world loot box and an unrecognised form of gambling, which I thought was really interesting to highlight. Some shopping apps, some online shopping apps also came up in discussion as well in terms of them having some gambling themes on their websites. And the other thing was just general internet browsing. So you can see the example that I found in less than a minute, mind you, has some gambling ads just on a standard news site. Okay, so overall, young people are flooded with gambling ads in all facets of their life. Interesting that we found for this particular age group, so that 15 to 16-year-olds, similar to other research, that there seems to be a shift away from TV because we didn't get we didn't get any photos relating to kind of TV advertisements. And it came up very little in discussion as well, just more related to some mentions around kind of live sport. But in terms of unique insights from our study, the highest concerns were around free online mobile games. So these are free online, offline mobile games, and then also those free audio streaming accounts as well. So nothing comes for free, it appears. And lastly, in terms of our next steps for this project, that last part of the workshop with our young people, we asked them to write down a letter to the Advocate for Children and Young People, expressing their ideas for change. And I'll just read out the first one of those, and it's, I was listening to music and I was rudely disrupted by a sports bet ad, and that made me sad. So in terms of our next steps, we need to theme or categorise and summarise all of the 265 letters that we got, and then we'll send them on to the Advocate for Children and Young People on their behalf. That's it from me. There's my contact details if you need to get in touch, and I've got the little letter there from a young person has absolutely nothing to do with gambling, but I thought it was funny, so it's a nice way to kind of end the presentation. Thank you.
That's a strong finish. Thank you, Crystal. And yeah, geez, those sports bet ads, right? I mean, advertising is annoying anytime. Another thing I found really interesting, until I met my partner, I didn't know that esports was a thing, and it's huge, like huge. And he could watch it for hours. And there's actually a significant amount of gambling wagers going against those games, and I think it's probably an area that will emerge as something that needs to be looked at if it isn't already. Very hard to control though, all this internet business. Okay, I'd now like to invite Paul Dovas. He's from Ad Clarity.
Thanks. Hi everyone, good morning. I actually wear a few hats. I was initially invited to, as part of being the CEO of the Australian Seniors Computers Club Association. So it's the ASCA. So we're a peak body that represents computer clubs that train seniors how to use computers and how to get online and how to improve their digital skills. What we found in talking to our clubs was that we don't necessarily interact with this issue in our clubs. Not to say that that issue doesn't impact seniors, it's just that we don't have that interaction. It's something we will be looking at a bit closer going forward, but for now, I thought, well how can I contribute to this? So a little bit more about ASCA. So it's seniors teaching seniors. The clubs are set up to and borrow from curriculum that are available through the federal government, and they can teach anything from how to use a mouse to actually how to track your stock investments online on an Excel spreadsheet. So it's quite varied. I think what is quite common and works really well is that seniors feel very comfortable being taught by other seniors, even though we do get every now and then students from university and high schools come in and that works as well. But there's a lot more comfort when there's seniors teaching seniors. The classes can be anything from a one-to-one session through to group classes, and sometimes even online if people are remote. So, okay. Ad Clarity. So that's another hat I wear. I assist this company with some strategic planning and marketing planning. And so Ad Clarity is a comprehensive ad monitoring tool. So people use it to track and benchmark how their online advertising is going. So they track billions and billions and billions of ads throughout the year. They capture the ads just before they hit a browser. They're able to strip the information that's attached to that ad, and then they come up with information around campaigns and categories of advertising, etc. They cover most of the online world. They'll cover everything from apps to websites on desktops. The only thing that don't cover, which we don't capture, are the smart TVs. So if you use a smart TV at home and you run a YouTube app and ads pop up, we're not quite capturing that as yet. But that's because it's technologically quite difficult to do that. But they're working on that. Data in Australia is collected from over 500,000 human panellists, so it is quite a comprehensive study. And all the major social media channels are covered. Every person that participates on that panel opts to be on that panel, so it's all compliant in terms of privacy and data laws, both here and globally. So I put up this slide. There's heaps of slides like this around. The source of this slide is a company called Scalio. And I just wanted to really, rather than going into detail about what that means, just to sort of emphasize the complexity of the online advertising world and how it works. Essentially, it's machines talking to machines. Yeah, the human element is the end result and the victim of all this advertising, but it really comes down to machines talking to machines. There's a real thirst for data. So companies like I think Quantium, etc., who Data Republic, they get sources of data through people like MasterCard, Foxtel, Visa, etc., and they bring all that data together. So all those rewards cards we use, etc., all that buying data, that all comes and feeds into this ecosystem here. And what this ecosystem is designed to do is to find someone who's likely to buy a product or a service and then track them down till they do, basically. And they do that through analysing the behaviour of what you're doing online. And just back to Hillary's speech earlier about the ads that were popping up in games for kids, a lot of that is because this system doesn't know it's a kid behind that mobile phone. So it's picked up a certain behaviour and thinks, okay, this person's likely to advertise, let's just flood them with ads. And then what happens, once you're tagged and you're continuing that behaviour, it keeps retagging you. So it chases you around the ecosystem. So you might go from an app to a website and that ad will follow you. And the reason that happens is because the ads aren't predetermined. The space on a website or in an app is like real estate. And that real estate is auctioned off through this complex system, and it's all happening in milliseconds. It's auctioned off to the highest bidder, and that highest bidder gets to deliver their ad to that space. So, and that's why it keeps tracking you around. The other issue why you might find these ads on kids' sites, etc., is because a lot of it happens at a higher level. It happens at an IP level, which is the ID on a router, like what's on the wall back there. So everyone that uses that same router is treated as one person sometimes. So it might be an adult who goes and places a bet on the TAB sports bet site, etc., and then anyone else that comes on board, whether it's a child or another adult, they're getting targeted the same way. So those ads will end up in kids. And there are filters, etc., but they don't work that well because that all depends on how these ads then are classified and the metadata that's on the ads to pick it up and then and apply the filter. So I hope I have confused everyone. But so I just wanted to get into some stats around what we picked up in the financial year ending June 30 this year. So a total of 8.7 billion ad impressions were served to Australian eyeballs. That's the estimate. We're pretty confident with these numbers because it is such a large sample size that we're looking at. Oh no. So that translated to about 38.9 million that was spent either on sports betting, lottery, casino, or poker ads. There is another category, which is bingo, and I think it's sort of there's things like Keno, etc. But most of that ends up in lottery and in other categories. So I didn't bother putting it in because it was quite small. So that 38.9 million is just for online advertising. So that doesn't cover TV, it doesn't cover radio, it doesn't cover print, etc. Okay. So there were over 1,355 unique advertisers picked up, and there were over 81,000 unique creatives. So that's 81,000 different ads that were served within those 12 months to Australian eyeballs. The reason why that number is so big, and the campaigns that translated to 4,600 different campaigns, is because the sporting industry in particular is one where you'll get a different ad every week for every sporting event it's on. So if it's an NRL ad, there's 6-7 games a week, there's 7 different ads at least that week. So you then end up getting quite a bit of creative. PointsBet was the highest spender, about 2.5 million, and Sportsbet delivered the most ads, 1.3 billion. There was 1,500 different publishers that were used throughout the year, and that's because of that retargeting. So again, the system doesn't know and doesn't care who the publisher is. They just know there's a spot available to put an ad to someone they think is likely to act on that ad. So I didn't produce a list, but when you go through that list, you'll end up, as you start to go through that list, there's a lot of kids' sites on there because of that retargeting. Facebook attracted the most ads and the most ad spend, 2.9 billion and 14 billion respectively. Over 64% of the ads and ad spend was on social media. And nearly 90% of all ads were delivered through the programmatic means, which means that system trying to target. So people can still advertise directly. So I think the ad that you had up with the Everest Racing on the News Corp, that looked like a sponsored ad. So they would have said, for the next week, we're going to sponsor that page, and can we just have that real estate and do it that way? So that's considered direct advertising, which is a different category. But most of it is through programmatic. Okay, that's it for me. I think I'm out of time anyway.
Nailed it. Thank you. Sorry, thanks. Thank you, Paul, for highlighting how much money I'm not getting by not allowing advertisers on my website. Proudly. I now invite Guy Morell, he's the owner of Mind Cafe, and he's also been the subject of many, many Manly Observer articles, all positive. Okay. Here you go. Thanks, Guy.
Hey everyone. I'll put this on. So in 2018, I actually used gambling and alcohol as a coping mechanism, which took me to the point to trying to take my own life that year. So I like, in the early 2000s, I remember going, being always around gambling. Like you go with your friends and let's put some money on Keno, let's put some money on some poker machines or whatever. Really just casual and you always thought, it's just just $20 here and there. But then I remember this one point that probably led me to thinking maybe there's a bit more sinister to gambling. And I finished university and I was like, oh gosh, I've got 2 or 3 hours to just do nothing. I'll go to the RSL and I'll just put dollar bets on the TAB. And I'll never forget this one win. I put $1 on and I won $277. I was like, oh my gosh, how can I win $1 for not even thinking it? And then obviously probably my subconscious mind is probably thinking, shivers, there's probably an opportunity here. Falsely, obviously. But there's an opportunity there. And then when you go through your own progress and, the late 2000s come and then the internet goes crazy with sports bets and TAB online and everything. And then all of a sudden you kind of start feeling yourself kind of going, she's not enjoying this, but you're kind of hiding away from everyone. So rather than being a social situation, I'm like tending and going, okay, I kind of really enjoy this. And I love when the footy's on and trying to pick the person who can score a try and stuff like that. So all in my head, I'm like, this is all fun and, fun and it's not impacting anybody. This is what I'm thinking. Anyway, then it gets to a point where I get married and I'm enjoying, loving everything, everything's going well and the thing. And then all of a sudden, my ex-wife and I, we start having problems. So I start tending, okay, well, what do I do now? I might as well put that energy into betting, especially online. The accessibility is crazy, So I started I was actually hiding it away, not thinking that I'm hiding it away because I'm like, if she asks me, I'll tell her. But, I'm actually hiding because I'm doing it in my own time. Get super excited about having drinks and beers, watching the footy coming out, trying to get that, that first try scorer or whatever. So, but then when we said, Guy, we're going to, let's separate because let's do it amicably because we know that we don't have a future together. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And that put me into like, oh my gosh, I'm not safe anymore. But what made me feel safe? Gambling, alcohol, all that stuff. So early in 2018, that's all I'd do. I'd sleep at my office and just drink and gamble every night. And that took me to a point where I didn't want to be part of this world. So as you can see here, why do I enjoy gambling? And I can tell you, escape from worry and stress. This is probably everyone as well. Relieve feelings of helplessness anxiety or depression, that was hugely for me. Because it took me into this safe zone. I used to love it because I get caught into this zone and I feel so comfortable. It's like a cocoon kind of thing. Love the feeling of the rare highs. This is what we forget. We always usually we promote, you tell your friends, oh yeah, I won this, but you don't tell them every loss that you've done. But you get super pumped when you get that rare high. Now, I don't know if it's a dopamine rush or whatever it is. It's doing that thing within inside you which excites you. I love the social aspect with friends. So I love that, when we can all go, oh, let's put in $50 each and blah, blah, blah. You're not hurting anyone. But when you decide to continue to gamble alone, and that was my life. I'd still go to the races with all my friends and stuff like that, but once I got home, I've had a few drinks in me, I'll continue betting until all night and you've lost everything. It's so crazy, it's crazy. Okay, what were my triggers? So this is for the problem gambler too, guys. What were my triggers? Because even if you're just gambling socially, you would obviously get the advertising, so it flicks the switch. The betting offers that come. Drinking is bad for me because as soon as I drink, all my inhibitions go out the wall. And then what do I want to do? I want to gamble. The footy season, oh my gosh, when it comes to, I get worried because when it comes to February, I'm like, oh my gosh, the footy season's coming. Oh God, don't get urged to gamble again. But it always tends to rope me in. Weeks leading up to the Melbourne Cup. This is exactly this time. What am I thinking every Saturday? It's on Channel 7 and blah, blah, blah. First thing I want to do is gamble. But I've got to be strong. That win, that gets you hooked again. So even if you're doing it socially, like the $277 I talked about earlier, oh my gosh, it's easy money, let's just do it. You love it, you enjoy it, you're making money from it, so you get hooked from that. And the accessibility of betting sites and apps. Okay, how do I manage my problem gambling? So I still have 2 accounts. One's got $75 in it, the other one's got $100 in it. But it's restricted. So I had to my poor partner, Anna, has to deal with this all the time. She can't believe it. In Brazil, it's illegal. It's illegal in Brazil. She can't even understand it. And we're here just, it's nothing. It's part of our culture. Being held accountable by loved ones. So that's the most important thing for me. Somebody telling me, Guy, why'd you do that? Why'd you spend that money? We could have put that money towards something else. But hiding it, I believe, can cause more issues, especially with that problem gambler. Substitute my gambling time with healthier options. What I tend to do now is go to the gym a lot, spend time with more friends, spend time with the loved ones. I'm still not perfect, don't get me wrong, guys. I'm still not perfect with that stuff because it still hits me every day. This gambling, that idea that I still want to crave and do something that makes me feel that safe and be in a cocoon again. Pinpoint my triggers. So everything comes make sure you're conscious about it. Kind of really understand that, oh no, that's coming up again. So what can I do? Tell your partner or tell your friends. Because all my friends know that all the struggles that I've done in the past and the unhealthy options I chose. My partner manages the money because this is the best thing. It's if you got no money, you can't gamble, right? So, so that's the best thing. I always think, as a problem gambler, if you have somebody who can take your finances and control them for you, I think it's always a helpful thing. And talk about my urges to people who I trust. I think that's amazing because, if you can talk about it openly, you're not hiding it and you can not get caught into that zone again. We talk about the zone always. For anyone out there that really understands the addiction side of things, you tend to get caught into a comfort zone. There's this beautiful little thing that I feel so amazed. Every time I have, my alcohol or the beautiful music that I love or the gambling side of things, it actually puts me in a cocoon that I feel safe. Of course, there's probably more emotional side to that, and and whatever traumas people enjoy in their life, and that's probably the reason why they go to this zone. So what do? We have to try and find ways that we can, you know, counteract what's actually going on. You know, try and do things that maybe are a bit on that healthier side. Like us at the Mind Cafe, what we tend to do, we talk about it openly. So we're so lucky because the most beautiful part of what we're about, I love when people come up and say, Guy, I know you struggled with gambling. I struggle with gambling too. And what happens then? We create this little community that you can be there for each other. So I can talk about 5 or 6 people that come and see me regularly, and I will say to them, how are you going? And when they can say to me, I've been good, Guy. But if they say the other way, I don't judge them. I give them a hug and say, come on, let's start again. Because we have the ability to start again. So there's no point pointing fingers at certain people because we're all unique. We all have our positives and our strengths and negatives and our weaknesses. But we just got to try and be there for each other. The support network's so important. So if we can kind of be there as a community talking about problem gambling very openly and not see it as a negative, because and I think any gambler can find themselves where I was in 2018. Because we've got to be super careful, not making it too easy and not get people playing with their emotions, playing with that dopamine rush that everyone wants. So if we can all be there, talk about, tell it about it openly, without the judgment, I guarantee we can all play a part in other people's lives. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that, Guy. And that's such an important point about shame and bringing these conversations out and being able to talk about what your problem is rather than hiding it. And also about the fact that, you know, you may not be gambling now, but, you know, you recognise that that's an addiction that you have to manage. And it's, you know, it's a very different topic, but even I was quite a heavy smoker for lots of my life, and I refer to myself as a smoker who doesn't smoke. That's what I do. I actively manage it, and anything like an addiction is when you talk about it. Yeah, this is a thing. I'm not proud of it. It never really made sense, but it was something that gave me that feeling of security and, oh, well, everything's gone to shit, but at least I can sit and do this thing because for whatever reason my brain's telling me that it's a good thing to do. And so bringing that out in the open and finding something else that gives you that safety. And I suppose that's what we're hoping to be able to provide people in our discussions today. Now we have one final speaker, I believe. It is Alison Parkinson. She's the Director of the Office of Responsible Gambling, no less, and she's going to talk about Gamble Aware. Please welcome Alison.
Good afternoon, good morning everyone, and thank you so much to the organisers for the opportunity to be here today and to our other speakers, particularly you, Guy, for that really personal and powerful account that you've just shared. My name is Alison Parkinson. I'm from the New South Wales Office of Responsible Gambling, and I hope what I'll do with my presentation today is to set you up for the breakout discussions that you're going to be doing after this presentation. So although I am representing part of the New South Wales government, we're not the part of government that sets policy or laws around gambling, but we do have some funding that we use to work towards our vision of zero gambling harm in New South Wales. So we're just focused on preventing and minimising gambling harm. We do this in different ways, so I won't talk too much about who we are, but as you'll see in my presentation, we fund research, we fund education and awareness campaigns and training, and we also fund, really importantly, Gamble Aware services around the state. I'll talk about that first, and it's unfortunate we don't have a Gamble Aware representative here today, but it is a busy week being Gamble Aware week. So Gamble Aware services are available right around the state. They're free and confidential, they're available 24/7, and what's really important to know is they don't just support people who gamble, they also support family members and friends, and often it's a family member that might reach out for support. There's different types and levels of support depending on your needs and your circumstances, and different ways of accessing that support, whether it's in person, online, or by phone. So there's local providers, so including one here in the Northern Beaches. There's the helpline, which the number you see there was up before as well. And there's also a national website that does online chat 24/7, Gambling Help Online. So for people that aren't quite ready to speak to someone face-to-face, can't quite face making that phone call, sometimes that online chat, which can be anonymous, is a really great first step to getting help. So as I said, there's different types of support that those services offer, including more recently peer support, but they also have gambling counselling, financial counselling, and can help people with really practical steps as well, like excluding themselves from gaming rooms in the area or banning themselves from online betting as well. It's easy to refer. So they're the regions you see there, sorry. Oh, there we are. And I just really encourage you to get to know your local provider. If you're an organisation that is seeing clients who are impacted by gambling, if you think there might be opportunities to work in partnership with a gamble-aware provider, you've got their details there, and I know they'd really like to hear from you. And as you can see, they've got centres across the area. So that's one thing you can do if you're reflecting and talking about actions you can take in those discussion groups. Get to know your local gamble-aware provider, refer your clients and find out how you can be working with them closely so that is a seamless referral process. But depending on who you are and what you do, there might be other ways that you're interested in taking steps to not just respond to people experiencing gambling harm, but also try and prevent the harm that's happening in this community. So one thing you can do is to support the campaigns that we have in place. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of money and time to create work, so we'd really like you, more people and more organisations to benefit from the work we've already done. So we have a number of campaigns. One is Be Gamble Aware, which is just promoting the services and the raising general awareness of gambling as an issue and getting the community to understand that similar to other services, there are gambling support services available in the community. People are very familiar with things like Lifeline and Are You OK Day. They might not need it now, but at a time in the future when they do, they have that recollection of that service being available, and that's what we'd like to achieve with Gamble Aware as well. Oh, and I'm going to play an ad, but there's no sound, so we'll move on. The Number That Changed My Life campaign is a campaign we're really proud of and will be of particular interest to those that are working with particular culturally and linguistically diverse communities. So this is a campaign that's entirely in language. So it's in Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, Arabic and Hindi, and tells stories that resonate with those communities and really tries to address the stigma and increase the hope and confidence people have that they can reach out for support and they can recover from gambling harm. And we know that although gambling affects people right across the state, from all walks of life, sometimes the barriers to getting help or the ways that it impacts on them can be different. Oh, now I've been too successful. We've heard quite a bit about young people today, and we know from the research that we've done that parents are actually the biggest influence on children and their gambling intentions and behaviours. Now, I know it's unfortunate to, this is sense sometimes it's always the parents to blame, but there's a real opportunity for parents here to have a positive impact. And it's really simple things like not gambling in front of your children or helping them to gamble. So we do have a campaign that gets across those particular techniques. So if you're an organisation that does have access to parents, something that you can promote and share on your social channels or in your services. Finally, we know this week is Gamble Aware Week, so great to see events like this happening. It happens every year at about this time, so if you're not doing so this year, maybe next year as well as attending a fabulous event like this, you might look to host one as well. And we provide all the resources and information you need on our website to get behind the week and help share the message with the community. So that's campaigns. I know there's also a session after this presentation about professional development, and there are some existing education courses that we funded and make available to the community that might be relevant to your organisations or to you as a community member. So we have a Gamble Aware for Parents workshop, which is a bit of a deeper dive for parents into some of those issues we've heard about this morning about the risks for young people and the the ways that gambling might impact them now and in future. And I know our Gambleware provider can help run one of those sessions if you've got access to parents that might be wanting to do a workshop. We also fund Mental Health First Aid Australia to run a Conversations About Gambling course. So this is available right across the state. They've got trained facilitators. If you've done mental health first aid before, you know it's great training from a really high quality trainer. This one takes a particular focus on gambling and how you can have that conversation with someone that you're concerned is experiencing gambling harm, help them in crisis potentially, and also look after yourself in that conversation as well. So something great that you might want to put on if you've got a group that's interested, or just attend yourself. Every time. For those working in the community services sector, we also have funded the development of a gambling harm minimisation workshop for community workers. So we know that people, when they might be accessing financial counselling or coming into a homelessness service or a domestic violence service, but at the same time they might be experiencing gambling harm, and those workers have an opportunity potentially, where it's appropriate, to also provide assistance around gambling. So this course is available from the Centre for Community Welfare Training. I think it's about $30, and a really great entry point for people wanting to be more confident in talking to people about gambling, recognising when it's a problem and referring to services so that they can help them. Finally, we give funding to the Gambling Impact Society, who some of you might be familiar with, who have a really important program called the Consumer Voices Program, where they trained people with lived experience of gambling to go out and speak to the community and raise awareness of gambling harm, similar to what we've had here this morning. So if you were impacted as I was by the presentation we've heard this morning, you understand the power of hearing someone speak from their personal experience. Consumer Voices is a great thing to organise for your staff, for your clients, for the community group you're part of, to help spread the word about how gambling harm can impact people, but also what we can do about it. And one thing that we'd really love your help with is helping to get more gambling education in schools. So it's not currently on the curriculum, and it's very difficult to get anything on the curriculum, as you might know if you follow some of the debates about this in the papers. So what we've done is we've created some free, high-quality resources. They're mapped against the English, Maths and PDHP curriculum for high schools, and they are ready for a teacher to use. So they'll be teaching the curriculum. There's a lesson plan, there's an assessment task, all the activities are ready to go. They just need to pick it up and use it, and they'll be teaching the curriculum at the same time that they're educating young people about gambling. So it could be anything from, the obvious ones like statistics in maths, so they understand that if they gamble, they're probably going to lose. Or, in English, we've got some great activities, for example, where they debate the impacts of gambling, whether it does more harm or good, and interrogate the techniques that sports betting advertising uses to try and influence them. So they're developing the skills they should in that subject, but learning about gambling and hopefully reducing their risk of harm in the future. So teachers don't have to use that, but they can. So if you've got access to schools or you're part of an education network, we'd love your help promoting those resources to teachers. And there's some other training there which you can find information about on our website. Need to wrap up now. So just finally, if you're an organisation that does have a particular interest in getting funding for the work that you're doing, we do have a research grants program available, as well as a prevention and technology grant program as well. We don't have any grant rounds open at the moment. We can take applications out of session where they meet the eligibility criteria, and depending on the area you're in, sometimes there's also some ad hoc funding that comes up from the Community Benefit Payment Scheme when a venue gets additional gaming machines. And so if you're interested in that, you can register to be notified if that type of funding comes up in your area. So final plug, I guess. Some of you have got different opportunities to be involved, but there are some really simple things that you can do. All our information's on the website, gamblerware.newsouthwales.gov.au. We've got resources, brochures, posters in different languages for different communities. So even if it's as simple as putting some brochures into your local service, we'd love you to do that and are happy to provide them for you. And I'm very happy for my contact details to be shared with you after today, and love to hear your ideas as well. So there you go. Please subscribe to our newsletter, check out our website, and you can get in touch with us at any time with the email address there. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alison. That was fantastic. And that's the end of our expert discussions presentations. So now we're all going to separate into 3 groups. If you haven't already registered for a group, I think you can just walk into the one that you're most interested in. So just to recap, stay here for the professional development. At the very back, if you're interested in discussing youth and gambling, and then just behind that wall there, so just walk up the stairs and to the left for seniors. And then we'll all meet back here at 11:40 ahead of discussing the final suggestions and then the light lunch. Oh, okay, there's tea and coffee up there now? Yeah, thank you. Bathrooms, I know them. Through there and then to the right, and then when you think you've gone the wrong way, you haven't, and then to your left. And I don't know where the emergency exits are, but somebody can probably point to them. Okay, if we could just have everyone back inside and seated. And I'll look for my notes. I think I just have to introduce. Doesn't matter, I don't need them. Have we got everyone? Are we closing the doors or just leave it? Okay. Well, congratulations to everyone who's still here. You are passionate about the issue or lunch, either way, both good things. So you've all split into your groups, you've had your powwow, you've got your ideas, and now we're going to have one person from each group going to present some of the ideas and the concepts or whatever it is that you did. I did see somebody with butcher paper. That's very impressive. So I'm assuming you're going to be a speaker. I think in tradition we'll start, we'll say seniors first. And if we can actually have the speakers from who are going to talk, just all come up, I think. So there we go. Oh, sorry. So we've got Liam from Forest Kirk, Reverend Trish Rooney, and Reverend Liam. We've got Jolene Hackerman, Sarah Grattan, and we've got 3 councillors, Kristen Glanville. Okay, so we'll start with you, Liam. I'm just going to hand you the mic, and then once you're finished your presentation, just pass it down to Jolene.
Thanks, all. So the issue we focused on was RSL predominantly opening hours, the fact that the pokies rooms can stay open till 4 a.m. or likewise. So the idea of needing that, people are there sometimes just looking for a place to be, looking to hold off the loneliness and meaninglessness of home, looking for just a place, but obviously terribly spending money. But there's lots of reasons to be at the club. So we've tried to focus on some ways that we might address some of this. So some of it is trying to think about policies that enforce breaks, whether that means that you don't get drinks delivered, whether it means you have to get up and actually move out to get a drink, whether it's a way of machines actually having cutoffs after a certain point to at least make you move to another one, just a little breaks. The idea too of, this is a larger campaign of preset limit cards and cashless cards, which we've seen, so putting energy around that and advocating for those changes. We've also seen, that the idea of, at a core aspect, is needing to foster community connection and meaning, whether that's away from gambling, right? So focusing on finding ways for people to have a place to go at all these different times where they can feel connected and gain community and have an alternative that's not there. And then, other things of promoting the good that particularly clubs which have moved away from a pokies model are doing, and celebrating the different ways of having community gathering around. I think part of what we were saying is recognising, the ease that clubs provide, both in terms of the cost of getting a meal or a coffee, a place that you can go that's accessible, you can move easily around tables, you can actually hear the person you're sitting at a table with, you can stay for as long as you want and not start to get the hurry on. That these are things that people value and look for. And the problem is at the moment that they're coupled with this other aspect that causes so much harm. So trying to think of some ways of limiting that harm and moving forward with some other things that help break some of those cycles.
Thank you. You got enough hands?
I feel like I'm one of the Wheel of Fortune kind of
Councillor Glanville has some amazing ideas. I've both of these ladies, so I feel silly that they're holding up the butcher's paper, but here we go. So what we recognised is that the key problem is that there's an attractive entry point within venues to the pokey area. And we thought that potentially for the at-risk youth, that this was an exclusive area, and it was something that that they'd seen their parents do, and they thought this is a way to access something that's VIP that they wouldn't otherwise get. And youth and tradies in particular, I think that would resonate very highly with them. The other area of the problem, as mentioned by you guys, is that there are incentives such as free drinks and that there is an all-day and all-night accessibility. So there aren't very many other places for people to go other than going to play the pokies and going to the club. One of the other areas of the problem is that there is that convergence of gaming for youth as an identity aspect, that they are gamers. And then when they're playing those games, they see the online aspect of all the ads and they think, I'm into gaming, and now all of a sudden they've stepped into gambling that's also highly addictive. What does that say? So one of the other things is that these clubs are a social area, and so often you go to celebrate with your family or your friends a birthday, and then what happens is everyone leaves, and yet you're still there at the pokies by yourself, and it's not your friends and family there anymore, it's actually the staff who are there bringing you another drink, asking you if you need anything, and encouraging you to stay longer. So it's very easy to slip into that problem. Some of the solutions that we talked about, particularly at the community and council level, was that we recognised that in our area in particular, there are between 1,200 and 2,000 registered machines in the Northern Beaches, and that it is very profitable for them. But what we know from research is that for every dollar spent in gambling, there's a $7 social cost. And so the clubs go ahead and promote their social enterprise and social grants, but that's only 0.85% of their profit, and that is tax deductible. So I think as a community, we want to make sure that we're helping those businesses transition away from that business model into something that is profitable but doesn't have such a huge social impact. So another idea that came up was obviously cashless gaming cards that you guys mentioned, and that allows people to put limits on it. It's traceable if you're going to different venues, and also allows your family to intervene and to put those limits on that Guy so bravely said was important earlier. Some of the other things that council could do is to create alternate late night activities. And while we know that pickleball is one of the fastest growing popular sports in the area, not everyone likes pickleball. So someone in the room suggested ad-free gaming nights. Actually, it was you, Sarah. Ad-free gaming nights in a community centre. And we thought that we'd take that technology and that gaming ideology and make it a late night hackathon. So get them all together in a community centre, get them super excited about working on something together that has all the bells and whistles and that is exciting. And we also have our 24/7 libraries that could be used as a space for that as well. We could offer bigger support to businesses that don't have pokies. Nick mentioned that in Brookvale we have all those breweries don't have pokies. Let's offer them some more support. We could limit the opening hours of venues that do have pokies, because I remember Wesley Mission telling me a couple of years ago that people are making terrible decisions between the hours of 12 and 4. So limit those hours. From a community perspective, community education is critical, and we need to break that cycle generationally and make it a mental health issue. Talk about it not as a problem, but as a mental health issue. Not for them necessarily, but them as an ecosystem of very powerful forces that they need help to support of getting out of. Also, we have a federal inquiry that came out a couple of years ago. We wanted to make sure that those recommendations in that federal inquiry were actually implemented and reported back to the community. We also said education for teens. Councillor DeLuca mentioned that we have some council-owned education or council-run education for children, but then we don't talk to the community again until the HSC arrives. So a great idea to talk about relationships, social risks, gambling, drugs and alcohol harm, and just upskilling parents to be able to support their children through those really tricky years when we know that they're searching for dopamine and don't understand the consequences of risky behaviour.
Goodness, I need my glasses on so I can see that. So two of the groups in our room ended up with a very similar topic. So we're going to do a bit of a, what do you call it?
Joint comedy roast.
and I'm the straight one, you can be the funny one. So that works a bit better. So the issue we were looking at was young people being groomed for gambling through gaming and simulated gambling. So not all gaming is gambling, but there's a lot of gambling that is sneaking into gaming sorts of activities. And we were looking at some of the sort of elements of the problem. Just lost my thing. So we're looking at education and the need to educate the kids so that they can identify what gambling might look like. We talked about educating parents of what sorts of signs to look for kids, and we were talking about the screen guidelines coming in for primary school kids, what we could be using as a education campaign for high school kids to identify gambling and what does that look like when they're gaming. And we talked about teachers and educating teachers, providing training for teachers, and there's a whole lot of curriculum activities available now. We just need the schools to actually use them. And do you want to talk about problem first and then we go into solutions?
Sure. Yeah, so we talked a lot about how gaming is a big part of youth culture, and it has some good sides like social connection that either in person or through online gaming communities, people bond over gaming and sometimes even over the gambling aspects of gaming where they might commiserate with each other over getting a crappy item in a loot box. But a lot of, we spoke about how the business model for gaming has changed from it being something you pay $50, you get a game, you play the game, to the games are offered for free, but then in order to make money, they then need you to make in-app purchases, and the way that they entice that is through having addictive elements to why you need to make a purchase. And so as a result, there's sort of not the same. While for more conventional forms of gambling, we recognize, we see it and we look at it as gambling, but there's not necessarily the same literacy amongst parents or state and federal regulators that this brings the same kind of problems as conventional gambling. And we also sort of talked about how the fact that so many games have either gambling imagery or gambling mechanics, it sort of tickles the same part of the brain as gambling, and that it feels like we're kind of grooming children to have gambling problems, particularly as gambling through apps has really increased. And so when you're doing gambling activities on a game app, the bridge to leap to then doing gambling activities on a gambling app is a pretty short bridge to leap. So in terms of solutions, some of the things we talked about were how we, for example, as a community and as a council, we could get more of those Office of Liquor and Gaming resources into schools through the curriculum, getting parents engaged through sort of education nights and learning. We talked about how we could get more young people sort of engaged on this, and the council has a youth advisory group, so we thought maybe it would be good to refer this as a topic to the YAG to kind of get their ideas about how to engage young people on this topic. We thought about strengthening council's role as a landlord to increase the sort of, at the moment council's sort of obliged to sort of try and phase out gambling advertising on its land, and whether we could strengthen that by putting a time frame around when that phase out might happen or that sort of thing. We talked about how council has free Wi-Fi and whether there was a way to block gambling advertising on council's free Wi-Fi so that at least there's one place where people are going where they're not getting that type of advertising. We also, I think, and advocating to the state and federal government to regulate gambling and gaming in a more similar way to how it regulates it in more conventional gambling.
Thank you. And some of the other ideas we were talking about, how we could use council and some of council's activities to help address this issue. So council has, providing access to information and training. So access to help in libraries, community centres and newsletters could be good avenues to provide some of this information through to parents and families, and as well as the young people. And then talking about filtering tools, so a bit like we've done with solar panels, trying to break down something complex and providing information available to the community about to help improve their understanding. Similarly, we could promote filtering tools for families so that they know how do we filter out these ads that are coming in through our IP. What do we call what ISPs? Into the portals. When we saw that really scary graph of all of the advertising targeting, how can we help families to try to stop that happening in their households? We talked also about educating, the kids, the parents, and the schools, and then this idea we came up with the ad-free gaming areas. So if you've got some sort of firewall that can block the ads, you could put that in a community space, in a library, have a gaming night for young people. Also combating the isolation that one of the other groups was talking about, isolation being a problem. Bring the kids together, it's a safe space. You've got someone that can help explain some of the how to identify some of these ideas. And then we also talked about some planning laws as well, and how do we restrict the visibility of advertising. Thank you.
Was that subtle? Can I just invite you up as well to speak about the professional development side? Thank you so much for those suggestions. So I was going to save the summary till the end, but what I'm picking up is, from the seniors side, one of the strong suggestions was actually providing that late night alternative where you can still do something at midnight. I know certainly my nan was probably up from 11 till 4 a.m. And usually it was because she wanted to start for the quiz or there's something on. So if we can perhaps come up with some kind of strategy that creates a space late at night for the seniors, I think that was probably one of the main suggestions coming out there. And then obviously for the youth group, getting the idea of, not trying to say, you shouldn't game because it's addictive, but rather saying, well, let's enjoy, let's all, why don't you all get together and enjoy gaming, but without some of the disruption of those ads, and perhaps that can also be used as an education tool, and engaging with local schools. And, as a community, there's nothing stopping us from all getting together, even if it's at Bucketies, where there are no pokies. There is alcohol, and getting together and perhaps educating. I mean, I loved these speeches this morning. I thought it was going to be too much, kind of front loading all these talks, but I could have listened to probably at least an hour more, depending. And so, I think maybe if we can share that with other people and perhaps focus on specific things at specific times. If any of those suggestions is there anyone who objects to any of those ideas? And can I just have a general eye if you like many of those ideas? Very good. And I feel like there's, I did hear that we have a Narrabeen-based kind of gamble aware, but perhaps we need to be looking at having some kind of group that borrows from that, but isn't actually sitting under that. So would there be a general agreement that perhaps some particular type of group or committee should form? Can I just get a show of hands if there's an interest in that? Whether it's, discussing gambling in the Northern Beaches or whatever it is, it'll be a specific group. Okay, so we've got about 90%. So I think if you've got your name down, and if you haven't put your name down yet, there is it up the back? I reckon it'll be near the food. That's yeah. Now I was, and I'm not going to now because now I'm actually standing between you and food. But I did a little post this morning on Manly Observer just as we went live. It's been shown to a few thousand people and it's already been engaged by a few hundred people, and people have started to comment on there. And a lot of the messages that are got in there, obviously a lot of it has more to do with things that are probably not really within our remit, because it's talking about not allowing pokies or creating restrictions there. And that may be in the future, but I know there's also arguments against that, and people kind of want to be able to want to be able to pick their poison. But what's clear today is that not everybody is able to identify that it is poison, and so perhaps that's an area that we can all work in as a community with education and helping people like our friend whose name I did not catch. Thank you, Lisa. And yeah, maybe we can just do a bit better. I think that is the end of proceedings. Have I missed anything? Okay, that is us. Yes. Oh, yes, of course. Kristen Glanville, where are you? Right in front of me. So I'm going to get you to finish it, Kristen, because I got nothing else to say. We're going to hear from Kristen because she's a councillor in my ward, Curl ward. Recently been re-elected, and it was Kristen who actually fought for this roundtable to go ahead. So I think hearing a few words from Councillor Glanville would be worthwhile. If you want to come up, and I'm going to give you the honour of setting everyone free for food afterwards. And thank you for your time.
It's great to have so many people here. Gambling is such a huge issue. But it's also such a hidden issue that I think it's good that we've had a forum where professionals, the community advocates can kind of all come together and have some shared learnings from a whole bunch of different viewpoints, and I think I found it really valuable. I was going to give a recap of what all the speakers said, but I am very conscious that I'm standing between you and food. So I won't do that. But I mean, I think just to kind of give a few highlights, I was pretty much astounded by, I think the advertising one was the one that really struck me the most. 1.3 billion ads from just one gambling company have been served. That nearly, I think the other stat that really blew me away was the one that Kim gave at the beginning about a house on the northern beaches is gambled away every week, which is an astounding amount of money that ends up in the gambling industry. I think that it's clear that we have a lot of resources. I didn't know that the OLG offered all of those resources, and so obviously there's a part for us as a community about now trying to get those resources for schools and resources for the community, and for parents actually connecting the community with those resources, because clearly they aren't, and a lot of parents in the group, when we're talking about the youth issues, had some awareness but not full awareness about the extent to which gambling is getting into games which, from most parents' perspective, they think it's sort of something fun and nice that their kid has something that they can do and do with their friends, that they didn't know that there was this element, sort of insidious element to it. I also think that it was really wonderful that we had lived experience, and I think as the sort of organising committee, it was really important that we had people with lived experience speaking, that it wasn't just kind of professionals talking but actually that we heard from people who had lived experience. My grandfather was a gambling addict, and I saw the way I'd been told about the way I wasn't alive, obviously, about the impact that had on my mum and my grandma in the 60s, where if we're not talking about it now, we were even less talking about it in the 1960s, where, my mum's family basically lived on my grandma as a married woman in the 60s wage, so you can guess how little she would have been paid working in a factory in the 60s, lived on that wage because my grandfather, who worked in the railways, would gamble his paychecks away. And my mum, I see in the way my mum is, I love my mum, but she is terrible with money, and I'm sure that it is because the childhood she had, where money didn't exist. And probably whenever my grandma would have had money, she probably would have spent it straight away, because she would have, any money left lying around the house probably would have been gambled away. And I see that that's my mum's relationship with money, I'm sure is connected to her childhood living in a household with a problem gambler. So I'm really happy to see so many different parts of the community here. I want us to keep that this forum is step one in a multi-stage journey. So please sign up to join the working group, because if we have everyone in here kind of lifting a finger, that's a big impact that we can have kind of in the community, working together to bring all the right people together and to keep some momentum happening in the Northern Beaches. Gambling is such a huge problem. Our RSLs, although they do good in the community through the donations, I see it also as a bit of blood money, because the money comes from people who are at risk or problem gamblers. So I'm not here to kind of denigrate the RSLs, but I think we have to have a conversation with a lot of the clubs about how do we transition out of pokies, and how do we have other alternatives. And I think it was good that we had a lot of that discussion about what alternatives are there for youth and for seniors that are sort of age appropriate and pitched to different types of people, so that pokies and gambling doesn't have to be their sort of source of social engagement or their source of entertainment. So thank you everyone for coming. Our catering, I believe, is from the Mind Cafe. I suggested that by coincidence, but it's sort of sometimes the universe kind of delivers that kismet that I didn't know Guy was going to be a speaker. I just independently suggested he should do the catering, because I know he's such an advocate for mental health. So enjoy, and hope to see you all engaged in this subject.